a meeting with a multitude of the faithful. A chance for Pope Francis to speak to Catholics directly about the direction he wants to take.
A future in which the history of violence and marginalization suffered by our Indigenous brothers and sisters is never repeated.
But one day after he delivered an apology for the sins committed by Catholics at residential schools, the Pope's traditional Mass, including some Latin, did not address Indigenous cultures or traditions.
For an Indigenous person and a priest, this Mass was a missed opportunity of the celebration of Indigenous spiritual ways. It just, and being transported back into a time that I didn't even know as a child. So I don't know what else to say. I'm just amazed.
But the Pope's message did speak to others.
He's trying to direct us, I believe, the path forward.
People are in different areas of accepting it. So, I think that's up to residential school survivors. I'm a day school survivor.
Still, many want the Pope to back up his words of contrition with concrete actions.
What they need to do is to rescind the doctrine of the discovery that really imposed a lot on our First Nations people.
This Canadian Archbishop says the Vatican will release a document to address the doctrine of discovery that justified the seizure of Indigenous land by colonial powers.
It would be very good if the Pope could make that even clearer.
The bishops of Canada are fully committed to walking together with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples.
Canadian Catholic leaders pledged to continue the Pope's work. Some Catholics are also trying to do their part.
I noticed your shirt, the Every Child Matters shirt. Why is it important for you to wear that?
Yeah, well, I think each of us walk through our own journey through truth and reconciliation. And by wearing my orange shirt today gives me a chance to display my commitment.
Residential school survivor Joseph O'Brien,
these are my people. I love them.
Came all the way from the Yukon to see Pope Francis.
There's lots out there that aren't here to hear that apology.
He says there's a long way to go to mend relations with the church, but for him, this is a first step.
And when you're here and you see him in person, you come full circle.
So Olivia, so much meaning in a lot of those words. A day after the Pope's apology, we keep hearing more from Indigenous leaders. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's right. So we're hearing from the former chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Maurice Sinclair, who released a statement saying there's a big hole in the papal apology. No full acknowledgement of the church's role in running residential schools. He says the Pope continues to blame bad actors as opposed to taking responsibility for the institution that he represents. And Adrienne, we're also hearing concerns from survivors who are worried because the Pope did not address sexual abuse. He mentioned physical but not sexual abuse. And they say they want to address this with Canadian bishops in the coming days at a meeting as the papal visit continues and the Pope heads to Quebec next.
All right, Olivia, thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
So tonight, Pope Francis went to Lac St. Anne west of Edmonton, where primarily Catholic pilgrims have gone for more than 130 years. It's a deeply spiritual place for some First Nations people for far longer than that, known by the Nakota Sioux as God's Lake. He came to the sound of drums meant to echo the drumming that a Nakota chief heard in a vision, drawing his people here long before the arrival of settlers.
The water, you refresh us and sustain our lives.
He blessed the water from the lake and then sprinkled some on those seeking that blessing. Lac St. Anne is named after the Mother of Mary, grandmother of Jesus. The pilgrimage marks her feast day, continuing the Pope's message today of the bond shared with elders.
Let us return to the sources of life, to God, to our parents, and on this feast day and in the house of St. Anne, to our grandparents, all of whom I greet with great affection.
Those who go to Lac St. Anne seek a place of healing. The Pope's visit itself an acknowledgement that there's a lot of healing still to be done. So let's bring in the CBC's David Perlicha, a Vatican analyst. You've been here with us over the years. When it counts right now. I'm curious what your gut reaction was today at the Mass.
I was surprised this morning at the Mass there wasn't more of an Indigenous component and more Indigenous conclusion in the music, in the liturgy itself. There were many Indigenous participants, but I think they could have gone further. That surprised me. What didn't was the way Pope Francis encouraged people to reflect on ancestors' history and the value in that, and yet not get trapped in the past. And that's obviously a message to Catholics around the world, and particularly the elements in the Catholic Church that are fighting this Pope of change and the direction that he is taking the Vatican, which is towards the marginalized, towards the excluded, towards, as he spoke about this morning, the elderly.
And so let's talk about the Vatican for a moment. What sort of signals are you getting about how all of this is landing there?
The Vatican is in a really interesting situation. And speaking tonight at Lac St. Anne, the Pope said something rather interesting, and it's just been tweeted out on the official Pope Francis Twitter account. I'll read it. As a church, all of us need to be healed from the temptation of choosing to defend the institution rather than seeking the truth. With God's help, let us contribute to the building of a mother church that is pleasing to him. Now, this is an account, an official account that doesn't tweet out very often. This is a line taken from this evening. It's obviously something that the church wants us to reflect on, and we're going to have to sit back and think about what this means.
Lots of people are going to have a lot to say about the meaning of that.
They sure are.
All right, David Perlett, as always, thank you.